keynote speaker will be Mr. SABAH al-MUKHTAR, who is the president of the Arab Lawyers Association here in the UK. And Mr. SABAH, if you could start the keynote speech, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is SABAH al-MUKHTAR. I'm an Iraqi-born lawyer. I've been in Britain more than half of my life. And my other qualification is that I'm the grandfather of 3 beautiful granddaughters. FRBI stands for Foreign Relations Bureau for Iraq. Although my colleagues will be speaking about the 3 countries, that's Iraq, Syria, and Iran, my comments will be largely on Iraq. We are a group of volunteers who care passionately about Iraq and its people. We felt that the public is not being informed properly about the situation in Iraq. Spin and lies are being employed by everybody. You all remember the weapons of mass destruction, the 45-minute threat, the dodgy dossier. All will probably be discussed by the report of Chilcot inquiry, which is going to shed some light on some of the issues in 3 weeks' time, on Eid's Day, on the 6th of July. Britain, in this respect, is better than the USA, which still enjoys its achievements in the new Iraq: democracy, rule of law, freedom, and being a model for the Middle East. The first casualty of war is truth, is a phrase coined in 1918 by Senator Hiram Johnson in the USA. Hence, FRBI follows the news from local as well as international sources, checks what the allies say, what the Iraqi government say, and also what ISIS and other terrorist militias say or write. FRBI verify, check, and compare what is being said, and uses its expertise to describe the actual situation in Iraq. Not the wishful thinking, propaganda, exaggeration, or indeed understating the facts. It is the FRBI view that the state players are principally Iran and the USA, as well as the Iraqi government, with minor role for the Arab countries and Turkey. They act directly or through their proxies. The non-state actors is ISIS only from a Western perspective. But from an Iraqi perspective, it is the militias and other terror and criminal gangs. Do forgive me if I try and give you the history of the Middle East in 5 minutes. From 1299 until 1924, that's from the 13th to the 20th century, there was the Ottoman Empire. The Middle East countries were part of it. Following the First World War, Western countries decided to liberate the Arabs. By the Sykes-Picot Agreement, 15th of May 1916, i.e. last month, it was the 100th anniversary, they divided the Arabs between them, initially creating 6 Arab states: Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. And they had many protectorates and many mandate territories as well. They granted Palestine to the Jewish people from Europe and elsewhere. When the Cold War between the USA and the USSR began after the Second World War, a chain of defense treaties were established. NATO, which is North Atlantic Treaty Organization, CENTO, which is the Central Treaty Organization, and SEATO, which is Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. Iraq was forced to sign the CENTO, which is otherwise known as the Baghdad Pact. The governments established by the West were, let's say, friendly to the West, in order not to say subservient. In Iraq, for instance, Britain imported a king from Saudi Arabia, wrote a constitution with a lower and upper parliament chambers, like the UK. King George VI signed a defense treaty with King Faisal. And of course, Iraqi oil was shared with America, France, and Shell. Compare this with what happened post-2003. We had Chalabi, we had Nuh Fieldman Constitution, we had the SOFA agreement, and of course, we had oil. Necessarily, the people of these countries revolted against their rulers in the 50s through revolutions and coups d'etats. Fast forward, 1979, Khomeini came to power following a revolution in Iran. The next year, 1980, he started an 8-year war with Iraq. Iran now, in 2016, is still taking vengeance. 1990, Iraq unlawfully invaded Kuwait. The USA, UK, and other countries destroyed Iraq to liberate Kuwait. That was followed by a 12 years of Middle Ages siege, the result of which was more than 2 million Iraqis lost their lives, including 250,000 babies, which Madeleine Albright, the US Secretary of State, thought it was a price worth paying. That was not enough. So the US and the UK invaded and occupied Iraq in 2003. Because of the heavy casualties, troops were pulled out, handing the country over to people, though Iraqi born, they seem to bear no goodwill to the land or the people because of their allegiance to Iran. There are a few issues which I wish to briefly refer to, as it may assist in understanding the present. Actions, policies, and statements all turned facts on their head. So you have foreign troops occupy a country was called liberation. We all know liberation is when people get rid of foreign troops. Foreign troops went there to spread democracy, when in fact democracy is the majority of the citizens of that country setting up their own government, not foreign forces. Resistance to occupation, which is a right and a duty under international law, was labeled terrorism. Kofi Annan, the ex-Secretary General of the United Nations, remembered 18 months late to announce that the invasion of Iraq was, and I quote, illegal and unlawful. Under the Geneva Conventions, occupying forces are not allowed to change the laws of the occupied territories. The USA, through Ambassador Bremer, changed most fundamental laws in Iraq: the constitution, the judiciary, the armed forces, the economy, and even they changed the nationality law to give some of the foreigners an Iraqi nationality. British soldiers lost their life not for Queen and country, as is required by English law. but for Tony Blair's conspiracy with President George W. Bush. US strategy seems to be based on a scenario that Iraq is made up of not one people, but of Shia, Kurds, and Sunnis. Note, there is no word of Arabs. There are no Arabs in Iraq. The US is still, 13 years after the occupation, is still looking for the Sunnis. This is despite the fact that Iraq throughout its history was one country with citizens who may have differences, not unlike being Irish, Cockney, Catholic, or Scottish in England. But the Iraqis lived together until the occupation in 2003. I hope my learned colleagues may deal with issues such as the following. Who is killing more Iraqis? Is it ISIS? Or is it the 60 Iranian-backed militias? This is where the Iraqi domestic perspective dramatically differ from that of the outsiders. Europe has accepted a large number of young ex-militia members who bragged on their Facebook and other media outlets about the crimes they committed in Iraq before arriving on these shores. So the question, is Europe happy now to accept war criminals as asylum seekers? And what needs to be done in this respect? Britain and others signed the Sevres Treaty in August 1920, which was replaced by Lausanne Treaty 1923 and 24, which effectively banned the creation of a Kurdish state. Is there a change of heart now? Is a Kurdish state feasible, taking into account concerns of the neighboring countries? We know that Shiism is an identity of the maybe 5-7% of the Muslims in the world, but is Sunnism an identity? You can hardly meet a Muslim who refers to himself as Sunni. But many Shias will refer to themselves as Shia. Finally, perhaps you could come out with some proposals that assist Iraq and its people to get out of this quagmire. Thank you very much.